In this episode, we focus on a challenge that appears in almost every real security program, no matter how mature it looks on paper. Security dilemmas where there is no perfect option. A dilemma is a situation where important values conflict, such as security versus usability, privacy versus monitoring, speed versus verification, transparency versus confidentiality, or cost versus protection. Beginners sometimes expect that policies and standards remove ambiguity, but in practice policies can conflict, requirements can be unclear, and real-world conditions can force trade-offs. Promoting organizational ethics means building a culture and a decision process that handles these dilemmas honestly and consistently, without pretending the conflict does not exist. Resolving dilemmas without hand-waving means you do not rely on vague statements like "we will balance it" or "we will do the right thing." Instead, you identify the competing values, clarify obligations, evaluate harms, choose a course of action with clear reasoning, and document that reasoning so the organization learns and stays consistent. This lesson teaches a practical ethics mindset for security leaders who must make difficult calls under pressure and still preserve trust. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to start is understanding why ethical dilemmas are so common in security, because security work sits between many competing goals. The business wants speed, convenience, and innovation, while security wants reduction of risk and protection of sensitive data. Privacy principles want limits on data collection and monitoring, while security monitoring often wants more visibility to detect threats. Legal teams may focus on minimizing liability, while operational teams focus on restoring services quickly, and communication teams focus on protecting reputation. These goals are not evil. They are normal, but they create tension. Ethical leadership does not pretend the tension is not there. It makes the tension visible and manages it deliberately. For beginners, it helps to understand that ethical dilemmas are not a sign that people are bad. They are a sign that real systems have competing needs. The goal is to prevent those competing needs from being resolved through power or panic rather than through reason and values. When dilemmas are resolved thoughtfully, the organization becomes more consistent and more trustworthy. Promoting organizational ethics begins with creating shared values that guide decisions even when detailed rules are missing. Shared values can include respect for individuals, honesty in communication, fairness in how controls are applied, responsibility for minimizing harm, and stewardship of resources. In security, these values show up in choices like whether to collect certain data, how to handle insider concerns, and how to respond to incidents that might affect customers. Values are most useful when they are translated into behaviors, such as communicating risks clearly, documenting decisions, and treating people consistently across departments. Beginners often think values are too abstract to help, but values become practical when they shape what leaders reward and what leaders refuse to tolerate. For example, if leaders reward only speed and never reward careful verification, then ethics will drift toward cutting corners. A strong ethical culture makes it normal to ask, what is the harm, who is affected, and what obligations do we have, before rushing to action. Security dilemmas often involve privacy, because monitoring can protect systems but can also become invasive if used carelessly. A practical ethical approach begins by stating the purpose of monitoring, because monitoring should exist to reduce security risk, not to satisfy curiosity or to control employees unfairly. If monitoring is necessary, ethical leadership narrows it to what is needed, limits who can access it, and ensures it is used consistently with policy. It also ensures transparency at the right level, meaning people understand that monitoring exists and why, without revealing details that would help attackers. Beginners sometimes assume privacy and security are enemies, but the ethical view is that they are both forms of harm reduction. Privacy reduces harm from misuse of personal data, and security reduces harm from unauthorized access and disruption. The dilemma is finding an approach that protects both, such as using monitoring that is targeted, auditable, and governed rather than broad and uncontrolled. When leaders handle this well, they preserve trust while still gaining the visibility needed to protect the organization. Another common dilemma is whether to disclose information about an incident, because transparency can build trust while disclosure can also create new risk. Ethical leadership begins by identifying who may be harmed if information is withheld, such as customers who need to take protective actions. It also considers what could be harmed by disclosure, such as revealing sensitive details that attackers could exploit or revealing personal information unnecessarily. Resolving the dilemma means choosing a communication strategy that is truthful, timely, and respectful, while also protecting sensitive details. This often involves stating what is known, what is being done, and what steps affected people should take, without oversharing technical details. For beginners, it helps to see that ethical communication is not all or nothing. You can be transparent about impact and actions while still safeguarding details that would increase risk. Hand-waving happens when organizations either hide everything for reputation reasons or dump details without considering harm. Ethical resolution is a deliberate middle path guided by harm reduction and obligations. Resource allocation creates another dilemma, because security programs rarely have unlimited budget or staff. Leaders must choose which risks to address first and which to accept temporarily. Ethical decision-making in this area means prioritizing controls that reduce real harm rather than controls that look impressive or that primarily protect leadership from criticism. It also means being honest about residual risk and not pretending that limited investment results in complete safety. A security leader may face pressure to certify readiness or to claim compliance even when gaps exist, and ethics requires resisting that pressure and communicating limitations clearly. For beginners, this is the idea that truth is a security control. When leaders misrepresent capability, they create false confidence, and false confidence leads to riskier behavior and poorer decisions. Ethical resource allocation also involves fairness, such as not shifting risk onto less powerful groups, like customers or frontline staff, to make internal metrics look better. When security leaders treat resources as a stewardship responsibility, they help the organization protect the people most likely to be harmed. A particularly difficult dilemma involves disciplinary actions and accountability after incidents, because organizations must learn without creating a culture of fear. If leaders punish everyone involved, people will stop reporting issues and will hide mistakes. If leaders never hold anyone accountable, unsafe behavior can continue and trust and fairness erodes. Ethical resolution begins by separating blame from accountability. Accountability focuses on whether people followed processes, whether processes were realistic, and whether the system made mistakes likely. It also distinguishes between good faith errors, negligent behavior, and malicious actions, because those require different responses. For beginners, the key lesson is that ethical organizations design accountability to improve outcomes, not to satisfy anger. That might involve training, process redesign, and clearer roles, along with appropriate consequences when behavior is reckless or dishonest. Hand-waving in this area looks like vague statements about being a learning organization while quietly punishing whistleblowers, or claiming accountability while scapegoating a single person for a systemic failure. Ethical leadership makes accountability predictable, fair, and focused on improvement. Ethical dilemma resolution also requires a decision process that can be repeated, because consistency is what makes ethics real. A practical process begins by stating the dilemma clearly and naming the competing values and obligations. Then you identify who is affected, what harms are possible, and what requirements apply, including laws, contracts, and internal policies. Next, you evaluate options, including how each option reduces some harms while potentially increasing others. Then you choose an option and document the reasoning, including why alternatives were rejected. Finally, you review outcomes and adjust if new information changes the picture. This approach avoids hand-waving because it forces the leader to articulate trade-offs and to show that the decision is grounded in values and obligations. For beginners, it helps to understand that ethical decisions are often imperfect, but they can still be responsible if they are reasoned, transparent within appropriate bounds, and consistent with core principles. The process also protects the organization because documented reasoning supports audits, investigations, and later learning. Promoting organizational ethics also means building habits that make ethical behavior easier under stress. That includes training people on what ethical dilemmas look like, encouraging escalation when uncertainty exists, and creating safe reporting channels. It also includes designing controls that reduce the need for last-minute ethical improvisation, such as having clear approval paths for emergency changes, clear guidance on incident communications, and clear privacy boundaries for monitoring. When the organization has these structures, individuals are less likely to make risky decisions alone in the heat of the moment. For beginners, the important insight is that ethics is not only personal courage, it is also organizational design. A well-designed organization makes ethical choices the default because processes and controls support ethical behavior even when individuals are tired or pressured. That is why security leadership and ethics are tightly connected. Security leaders help design the environment where ethical decisions are made. Promoting organizational ethics and resolving security dilemmas without hand-waving means making ethical decision-making concrete, repeatable, and visible. You acknowledge that dilemmas are normal in security because important values conflict, and you use shared values like honesty, fairness, harm reduction, and respect for individuals to guide choices when rules are unclear. You handle privacy and monitoring by narrowing purpose, limiting access, and governing use, protecting both security outcomes and personal dignity. You manage incident transparency by balancing timely, truthful communication with protection of sensitive details, guided by obligations and harm reduction. You allocate resources ethically by prioritizing real risk reduction, communicating residual risk honestly, and avoiding security theater that creates false confidence. You design accountability to support learning without fear, distinguishing good faith errors from negligence and malice, and you use a structured decision process that documents trade-offs and supports consistency. When ethics is practiced this way, the organization becomes more trusted, more resilient, and more capable of making hard choices under pressure without losing integrity.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.